In late 2019, almost nobody had heard the name COVID-19. Within just a few months, more than half of the world's population was living under some form of lockdown. Streets that once carried millions of people every day fell silent. Airplanes disappeared from the sky. Entire economies slammed to a halt. By 2020, the global economy had contracted by around 3.1, marking one of the deepest peacetime recessions in modern history. Trillions of dollars vanished. Millions of businesses closed their doors. Families were separated by borders that had suddenly become impossible to cross. It happened so fast. But COVID-19's story does not start where most people think. It does not begin with overwhelmed hospitals or deserted city streets. It begins years before the first lockdowns, long before anyone had ever heard the word coronavirus on the evening news. Its roots stretch back millions of years, hidden inside creatures that rarely cross paths with humans. Imagine standing inside a dark limestone cave somewhere in southern China. The air is cool and damp. Thousands of bats hang silently above your head, barely moving. Every few seconds, one shifts its wings, sending tiny droplets into the air. Invisible viruses move between them, changing little by little, generation after generation. No explosions, no warning sirens, just evolution quietly doing its work. Nobody inside that cave could have imagined that one day, a distant relative of one of those viruses would help bring the modern world to a standstill. For thousands of years, coronaviruses existed almost entirely outside human attention. They circulated naturally among animals, especially bats, adapting continuously as part of nature's endless cycle. Unlike bacteria, viruses cannot reproduce on their own. They need living cells to survive. Every time they infect a host, they copy themselves millions of times. Most copies are nearly identical. Some are not. Tiny genetic mistakes, called mutations, appear randomly. Most disappear forever. A few give the virus an advantage. Over decades, centuries, even millennia, those small changes accumulate, creating entirely new viral lineages. This process never stops. Long before cities existed, before agriculture transformed civilization, before humans built pyramids or sailed across oceans, coronaviruses were already evolving in wildlife populations around the world. Scientists believe bats became one of their most important natural reservoirs because bats live in enormous colonies, travel long distances, and possess unusually strong immune systems that allow many viruses to circulate without making the animals seriously ill. Nature had built the perfect laboratory. For centuries, these viruses remained mostly confined to animals. Human contact was limited, and opportunities for spillover, the process where a virus jumps from animals to humans, were relatively rare. But that was about to change. As civilizations expanded, forests were cleared. Wild habitats shrank. Humans began farming larger numbers of animals and trading wildlife across increasing distances. Markets brought species together that would almost never meet in nature. The barriers separating humans from wildlife grew thinner. Every encounter became another opportunity. Every opportunity became another roll of the evolutionary dice. And that is where everything changed. The coronavirus family itself was not unknown to science. The first human coronavirus was identified in the 1960s after researchers studying patients with common cold symptoms discovered a previously unidentified group of viruses. Under the microscope, these viruses appeared surrounded by crown-like spikes. The Latin word for crown is corona. That simple observation gave the entire family its name. For decades, coronaviruses received relatively little public attention because the known human strains generally caused mild respiratory illnesses. They were inconvenient, not terrifying. Doctors treated them as another cause of the common cold, alongside rhinoviruses and influenza. Research continued, but funding remained limited because few people considered coronaviruses a major global threat. Then came 2002. In Guangdong Province, China, patients began developing an unusual pneumonia. The illness spread rapidly among healthcare workers and families. Scientists soon identified the cause, a new coronavirus. It became known as SARS. Severe acute respiratory syndrome infected more than 8,000 people across 26 countries and killed nearly 800 before aggressive public health measures stopped its spread. The world breathed a sigh of relief. Many believed the danger had passed. It had not. Only 10 years later, another coronavirus emerged in the Middle East. This one was called MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. Unlike SARS, MERS spread less efficiently between people but proved even deadlier, killing roughly 1 out of every 3 confirmed patients. Researchers noticed something unsettling. Both SARS and MERS appeared to originate in bats before reaching humans through intermediate animal hosts, civets in the case of SARS, and dromedary camels for MERS. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Scientists warned governments that another coronavirus outbreak was not merely possible. It was likely. This is the part most people never learn about. Years before COVID-19 appeared, numerous scientific papers warned that expanding human contact with wildlife, rapid urbanization, global air travel, and dense populations had dramatically increased the risk of another coronavirus pandemic. Public health experts urged countries to strengthen surveillance systems, invest in vaccine research, and prepare emergency response plans. Some governments listened. Many did not. Pandemics are expensive to prepare for. Until one arrives. By the late 2010s, international travel connected virtually every major city on Earth within hours. A virus no longer needed months to spread across continents. It needed days. Sometimes less. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. Late in 2019, doctors in Wuhan, a city of more than 11 million people in central China, began noticing patients with an unusual pneumonia that did not match known diseases. Some early cases were linked to the Wuhan seafood wholesale market, though not all of them, and researchers continue to investigate exactly how the virus first entered the human population. The precise origin of SARS-CoV-2 remains under scientific investigation, with several hypotheses still being studied. What is clear is what happened next. On January 7, 2020, Chinese scientists identified a previously unknown coronavirus as the cause of the outbreak. Just days later, they shared its genetic sequence with researchers around the world. That single decision changed everything. Within hours, laboratories on different continents began designing diagnostic tests. Vaccine researchers immediately started work using genetic information that had traveled around the world faster than any airplane ever could. Modern science had entered a race against time. But there was a problem. Viruses do not wait for meetings. They do not respect borders. And they do not pause while governments debate their next move. By January, international travelers had already carried the virus beyond China's borders. Cases appeared in Thailand, Japan, South Korea, the United States, Europe. Most people barely noticed. Many believed it would remain a regional outbreak, much like SARS had nearly 2 decades earlier. History seemed ready to repeat itself. Instead, history was about to be rewritten. The virus kept moving. Quietly. By the time much of the world realized what was happening, thousands of invisible chains of transmission had already begun. One infected traveler boarded a flight. Another attended a family gathering. Someone else went to work feeling only slightly tired. The virus needed only one thing. People. And that is when the world's most connected civilization became its greatest advantage. In January 2020, more than 100,000 commercial flights were taking off around the world every single day. Modern air travel had transformed the planet into one enormous network where almost any 2 major cities could be connected within 24 hours. It was a miracle of globalization. It became a highway for a pandemic. By the end of January, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. Even then, many governments believed aggressive border screening and contact tracing would contain it. They were running out of time. Unlike SARS in 2003, this virus often spread before infected people showed symptoms. Some never developed symptoms at all, yet they could still pass the virus to others. That single biological difference made COVID-19 far more difficult to stop. This was no longer just a health crisis. It was becoming a geopolitical one. Countries suddenly found themselves competing for masks, gloves, ventilators, testing supplies, and later, vaccines. Global supply chains that had been optimized for efficiency, not emergencies, began to fracture. Factories closed. Ports slowed. Cargo ships waited offshore. Products that people had taken for granted simply disappeared. Even toilet paper became difficult to find in many countries. The shortages revealed something astonishing. The modern economy looked enormous. But it was surprisingly fragile. For decades, manufacturers had relied on just-in-time production, keeping inventories as small as possible to reduce costs. It worked perfectly, until one part of the chain broke. Then everything broke. Automobile factories stopped because tiny computer chips were unavailable. Hospitals struggled to obtain protective equipment. Pharmaceutical companies searched desperately for ingredients produced thousands of miles away. One virus had exposed the hidden wiring of globalization. And every nation was affected. What happened next reshaped the entire world. On March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization officially declared COVID-19 a pandemic. Within days, governments introduced measures that had rarely been seen on such a global scale. Borders closed. Schools shut down. Concerts disappeared overnight. Professional sports stopped. Religious gatherings were cancelled. Cities that never slept became silent. Satellite images showed cleaner skies over industrial regions as factories reduced production. Highways emptied. Tourist destinations that normally welcomed millions stood abandoned. It felt unreal. For many people, the first sign that history was unfolding came while standing in a grocery store. Shelves were empty. Flour, rice, pasta, cleaning supplies, hand sanitizer. People who had never imagined shortages suddenly faced them together. The fear spread almost as quickly as the virus. And with it came an economic shock unlike anything seen in generations. The profits lost were staggering. The human cost was catastrophic. In 2020, the global economy shrank by roughly 3.1%, according to the International Monetary Fund. It was the worst worldwide economic downturn since the Great Depression. More than 255 million full-time job equivalents were lost globally during the first year of the pandemic, according to the International Labor Organization. Behind every statistic was a person. A restaurant owner locking the doors for the last time. A pilot grounding an airplane with no idea when it would fly again. A hotel employee carrying home the final paycheck. A parent wondering how to pay next month's rent. Entire industries collapsed almost overnight. Tourism, entertainment, hospitality, air travel. Small businesses were hit especially hard. Many had only enough cash to survive a few weeks without customers. Those weeks became months. Governments responded with emergency spending on a scale rarely seen outside wartime. Trillions of dollars were directed toward unemployment benefits, business support, healthcare systems, and economic stimulus. Central banks lowered interest rates. Money flooded financial markets. The goal was simple: prevent total collapse. But there was another consequence that few anticipated. Public debt soared. Inflation would later become a challenge for many economies as countries emerged from the crisis. This decision seemed necessary at the time. Its consequences are still unfolding. For centuries, pandemics had reshaped civilizations. The Black Death transformed medieval Europe. The 1918 influenza pandemic infected an estimated one-third of the world's population. COVID-19 joined that short, devastating list. But unlike those earlier pandemics, this one unfolded in the digital age. Millions of employees began working from home. Students attended classes through laptops. Doctors consulted patients over video calls. Families celebrated birthdays through phone screens. Technology kept society functioning. It also revealed deep inequalities. Not everyone had reliable internet. Not every job could be done remotely. Healthcare access differed dramatically between countries and communities. The pandemic did not create these inequalities. It exposed them. By late 2020, scientists achieved something extraordinary. Using decades of previous research on coronaviruses and new mRNA technology, multiple vaccines were developed, tested, and authorized in less than a year, an unprecedented scientific achievement. For many researchers, it was proof of what global collaboration could accomplish. For others, it marked the beginning of another battle. A battle against misinformation. Social media became flooded with rumors, false claims, and conspiracy theories that spread almost as quickly as the virus itself. People struggled to know whom to trust. Facts competed with fear. Science competed with speculation. And the consequences reached far beyond the pandemic itself. By the end of 2021, billions of vaccine doses had been administered worldwide, helping reduce severe illness and death in many populations. Yet the virus continued evolving, producing new variants like Alpha, Delta, and Omicron, each changing the course of the pandemic in different ways. The crisis was no longer just about a virus. It had become a test of governments, healthcare systems, economies, technology, and public trust. And the lessons the world learned, sometimes painfully, will shape global preparedness for decades to come. But even after the lockdowns ended, Even after businesses reopened. Even after airplanes returned to the skies. The world was no longer the same. Some changes would become permanent. Others are only beginning to reveal themselves. The lockdowns eventually ended. The masks gradually came off. The airports filled with travelers once again. From the outside, it looked as if the world had returned to normal. But appearances can be deceiving. COVID-19 did not simply disappear. It changed. The virus continued to evolve, producing new variants as it spread through millions of people. Most mutations changed very little. Some made the virus more transmissible. Others helped it partially evade existing immunity. The race between science and evolution continued. This is the part most people never think about. The vaccines that were developed in record time saved millions of lives by dramatically reducing the risk of severe disease and death. But no vaccine could stop the virus from evolving entirely. Public health agencies had to constantly monitor new variants, update recommendations, and prepare for whatever came next. The pandemic became a reminder that viruses are never truly static. They adapt. So must we. By 2023, the World Health Organization ended the global COVID-19 public health emergency. It marked an important milestone, but it did not mean COVID-19 was gone. The virus had become part of the diseases humanity would continue to manage, much like influenza. For many families, however, the emergency never really ended. Millions lost loved ones they never had the chance to say goodbye to. Children lost parents. Parents lost children. Grandparents met grandchildren only through phone screens. Healthcare workers carried memories they will never forget. The emotional scars cannot be measured on a chart. Neither can the psychological cost. Studies from around the world documented increased anxiety, depression, loneliness, and burnout during and after the pandemic. Students lost years of normal education. Small business owners lost dreams they had spent decades building. Some losses can never be recovered. Others will take generations to heal. And yet, amid the tragedy, humanity also witnessed something extraordinary. Scientists from different countries shared research at unprecedented speed. Doctors worked around the clock despite overwhelming exhaustion. Volunteers delivered food to vulnerable neighbors. Teachers reinvented classrooms overnight. Communities found new ways to stay connected despite being physically apart. History rarely shows only darkness. It also reveals resilience. The COVID-19 pandemic reshaped how governments think about emergency preparedness. Countries invested in disease surveillance, genomic sequencing, vaccine technology, and stockpiles of medical equipment. Businesses reconsidered global supply chains. Hospitals expanded intensive care capacity. Remote work permanently changed how millions of people earn a living. Some of these changes were temporary. Others may define the 21st century. The pandemic also accelerated technologies that were already emerging. Video conferencing became routine. Telemedicine expanded rapidly. Digital payments increased. Artificial intelligence began playing a larger role in medical research and drug discovery. A crisis had accelerated the future. But perhaps the biggest lesson was the simplest one. The modern world is more connected than ever before. That connection creates incredible opportunities. It also creates shared vulnerabilities. A virus too small to see reminded humanity that borders, wealth, military power, and technology cannot completely isolate one nation from another. Disease travels. Information travels. So does responsibility. COVID-19's story spans decades of scientific discovery, millions of years of viral evolution, and every inhabited continent on Earth. It was there when scientists first identified the coronavirus family. It was there when SARS warned the world in 2002. It was there when empty streets, silent airports, and overwhelmed hospitals became symbols of a generation. And it is still here today. Not as the same global emergency that shocked the world in 2020, but as a lasting reminder of how quickly life can change. It changed how we work. It changed how we travel. It changed how we think about health, science, and one another. The greatest economic shutdown in modern history did not begin with collapsing stock markets or government decisions. It began with a microscopic virus. Invisible. Relentless. Unforgettable. And somewhere in the natural world, evolution continues, quietly, patiently, just as it always has, waiting for humanity's next encounter.